Welcome, I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County's mayor, and as we travel around the county looking at the operations that we've got, I have an opportunity to have a discussion with one of our veteran employees, Joe Horne. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I'm not sure about the veteran line, but I'll accept it.
Well, the gray hair gives you away. I can say that.
I quite understand. Thank you for having me.
Joe, we're going to get into a lot of topics today.
Okay.
In the time frame that we've got some real urgent needs. And but before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Joe Horne. Where'd you come from? How'd you get involved in this big world of planning and zoning and census taking?
Oh, gosh. I think many people would argue it's completely by accident based on what I say and how I do it. But no, actually I'm from Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, about 61 miles or so south of here. And I got interested in planning purely by accident. I was well headed toward a law school experience and did a little intern work in Lawrenceburg back summer of '78. Became acquainted with planning, graduated, took a job with the Metro Planning Commission in 1980 and decided I enjoyed what I was doing and had an opportunity to go to the University of Tennessee to graduate school in planning. Finished up there in '85, did some private sector work, but I came to work for the county in 1991. I've been here ever since.
Done a great job. Joe has blessed us with wearing a lot of hats in his role as Community Development Director, which I don't know exactly how that title came around. You may know, but it's not really important, is that if it comes to zoning and planning and septic and sewer and those types of issues that deal with the issues out in the unincorporated area and your relationship with your city, with our city, your cohorts, your partners, it's so important. And then over the last 2 decades, we put another hat on your head and asked you to handle that, and that was kind of oversee the census.
That's correct.
That is required by the federal government, by law,
That's right.
by Congress. And I know that we're going to do a special show, but let's touch on it a little bit as we get into 2020, some of the time frames and the benchmarks and what you're needing for our county.
Well, as far as the census goes and the work to date, we are trying to just get the word out that the 2020 census is just around the corner, and we're working with a large group of partners. We're working with the other cities. We are working with the school system. We have worked with the business community, and the idea that we have always pitched on the census is it's coming. Secondly, what are the important things about the census? Well, first of all, a lot of federal and state tax money is redistributed on the basis of census. So it's financially it makes sense to be involved in the census. I think one figure put it $900 billion annually. So that's a lot of money. Second part of that, though, it just goes down to the fundamentals of why we had the census in the first place. It's mandated by the U.S. Constitution, and it's a means for us to ensure that we are fairly represented. The resulting census figures will be delivered to the President's desk by the end of next year, and that's the basis that
2021? Yes,
sir. Well, actually, it'll be 2020. It has to be in before the end of this year. And they'll be, with that, that's how we determine representation in Congress. Ultimately, we'll determine representation in state, local, county government. So it's very important we do all things, and I tell people it's all about fairness. We should get our fair share of money, but we also should get our fair share of representation, and that can make a difference.
So in the next couple of months, there's going to be some postcards mailed out.
That's right. What'll happen is sometime toward the middle of March, people in the county, and everywhere else for that matter, will be getting postcards directing them that telling them that the federal census is underway. And the nice thing about that postcard is there'll be a web address that they can go in and fill out their census form. There'll be a phone number so they can call in their census form, call in their census information. And finally, were you not to respond to either of those two, about a couple of weeks later, you'll be getting a nice questionnaire in the mail. But I will say this, it takes no more than 10 minutes to fill out a census questionnaire. It's essentially who's living here right now on this date. And so it's not, there's a lot of concerns about confidentiality, and we've tried to stress that the numbers, as I said, will be on the president's desk by the end of the year. But anything about age, who lives in the house, or anything else is essentially, unless somebody wants to go to prison, won't be released for 70 some odd years. So that confidentiality is very important.
And you're also needing workers.
That is correct. Census Bureau, and we can probably arrange to have that have those numbers, and the website has been recruiting people. We've done pretty well in this county, but they'll continue to need people. People rotate in and out, but we can make that information available throughout this broadcast because I must report this though. You can call me and I'll happily tell you where you can go, but I'm not recruiting directly. I'm just getting the word out.
Well, and Joe is the one that I've asked or designated to the Census Bureau to oversee what we do here in Williamson County. Many of you that are watching this show may live in the city limits, Franklin or Brentwood or Spring Hill or Nolensville, Thompson Station or Fairview. About every 2-3 years, 2 times between a 10-year window, the census is done on the even years, 2000, 210, 220, et cetera. And that's the way it's been done since 1800s.
1787, I think.
And then the cities do special census from time to time. The county, the entire county cannot do that, but once every 10 years. And the cities do that if they've had a large growth of population. They can redistribute some of those funds that come into the city. I think it's interesting in listening to you. So the last census was in 2010. That magic number we had just population-wise was around 183,000 people.
That is correct.
I'm predicting, and I didn't do real good on the football or basketball season, so take it for what it's worth, but I'm predicting we'll be north of 230 to 232,000 people in our county by the time all the numbers are accumulated.
I think the last estimate I saw was in the range of 238.
So I'm already a winner.
Yeah. I know, again, one of the things too.
It's phenomenal growth is what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. The numbers can be quite daunting, and it's indicative of other parts of the things we do here in the county as well. But I'll add this too. One reason why I think we've gotten excellent help from the cities is when they do a special census. They're doing it for trying to get a little better share of these shared revenues. And most instances, they use that baseline that let's say the 2020 census provides. So let's say we're talking 2023, 2024. They know what that baseline is, number of people, and they're out looking for the new subdivisions, and it makes it much easier for them to focus their attention on, where they have new folks that are coming in. So I think that they have bought into, they've always bought into the idea that this is mutually beneficial, that we do what we can.
Well, if you look at the raw numbers, and the number you mentioned was 238,000 people that we've got countywide, and all counting our cities, and had 183,000 10 years ago or in 2010. The math on that is just absolutely incredible, that a community could grow to the size that we have become in just 10 short years. And in those 10 short years, I think most people here in Williamson County have seen something in the paper, on the social world, or just on our TVs, that the phenomenal growth that's occurred just in our schools. We are, just in a few short days, will be opening our 49th public education facility in Williamson County School. That's not taken into consideration the Franklin Special, nor all the private schools that we have housed in our community. With that has brought this population explosion, and about every 10 to 15 years, your department again has to oversee some of we've labeled it the comprehensive plan, the comp plan. In fact, your planning director, Mike Madison, was talking earlier today on one of the radio stations about some of the processes. It was back in 2007, during the period of time that our economy kind of took a nosedive. 2007, 8, and 9, trickled a little bit into 10. So that's been a good 12 to 13, maybe 14 years ago that we've addressed this. How do we look at our unincorporated area, and how do we want that to look for the next 10 and 20 years? You and I have been around quite a bit, and in the late 80s, our first organized, approved comprehensive plan in the late 80s, 86, 7, or 8.
In that range, yes.
Was approved, and then you tweak it from time to time throughout the course of the chronological period. Okay, we made a boo-boo over there, let's get that corrected. But that's more of administration, to really roll up your sleeves and do tours and do public hearings and trying to get input. And it's very costly to do that, bringing in outside consultants, because although you're good and your staff is very good, we don't have those extra men and women that come into a community with that expertise that we need, so we have to hire them. So since about 1980, late 80s till now, we've touched it, we've tweaked it a little bit, but this is a major deal what we're looking at. It's been the first time since about 2007. So let's kind of talk about the comprehensive plan.
Well, the comprehensive plan is essentially a policy framework. It's what we're talking about, and after we're kind of giving it the more of an academic label. It's essentially the planning departments and the county's effort to go out to the community and ask them, what do you want to look like when you grow up? It's not static. None of this is static. We've had a significant amount of growth since we last looked at this in 2007. And so part of the engagement part of this is trying to understand statistically where we are going. Some of the population numbers you spoke of, some of the land supply numbers, some of the resulting developments and how those resulting developments play out on the land itself. And you invite the public in, and we listen to the public, and they tell us what they think we're doing all right, and they tell us things that we're not doing, in their opinion, all right as well. And the idea out of that is you craft a series of dare I say, policy statements that say, this is our vision. This is what we would like to see. We would like to see, let's say, a lot of things we talked about the prior plan. We'd like to see more conservation subdivisions, let's say.
And what is a conservation subdivision?
A conservation subdivision is in essence a subdivision where the base density of the property, let's say, if you're doing one dwelling unit per acre, remains the same. However, you use the opportunities, let's say, the availability of sewer to do smaller lots and to preserve not only to preserve open space within that, and that open space sometimes can be critical areas that I think we all have agreed on that are worthy of serving. You don't like to see houses on top of hills, perhaps. We certainly don't want houses within the floodplain.
Sure.
And other areas like that where we use that ability to shift around those sensitive areas to essentially affect a project that preserves those areas. But not only that too, most of these subdivisions as well, at some point or another, the road system will become that of the counties, and you get smaller service runs. In other words, instead of having 2 miles worth of road in a subdivision that ultimately becomes the responsibility of the highway department, you'll have somewhat less than that, maybe 1.5 miles. But experience is always the best teacher, and we put a very strong emphasis on that in 2007. And we have been disappointed is probably too strong of a word, but I would say that I think there are opportunities to do better, and that's one of the things we're looking at now. And overall, this is a pretty broad-based concept is the idea of community character. What do we want the county to look like in coming years? What we've sort of gotten out of this now, though, is, and the plan is going to focus on two things. The upcoming plan, business as usual, where that might take us, and town and country, where we can hopefully, there's an opportunity to, let's say, affect a blend between the rural character of this county, but also enhance certain areas where the infrastructure is available and use those areas to accommodate the growth. You've said this phraseology before. It's coming. we just have to figure out a way to grow smarter.
Well, and one of the reasons we're devoting this show to this particular topic, although we did touch on some other things, your roles and the census, and the comprehensive plan is probably going to be another 10 years before we ever look at it.
After this, yeah.
I was at some meetings yesterday, and again, I'll use the magic number. We got 235,000 people in total Williamson County in 2020. And let's say the census data does come in with that number. In the year 2045, which is it's not that far away, it's 25 years. Now, you and I will hopefully be up on the rocking chair and enjoying the life, but our county is to go from 235,000 to in excess of 500,000 people. So we're going to have a doubling plus more than, and where do these people live? As long as I have been the mayor, and as long as you and I have communicated, I would dare say that most of our emphasis has been about this community character and this zoning and this comprehensive plan. It's formality, it's the actual vote will take care of it, the planning commission members, but we get that input also from the county commission because they're the ones that have to take those phone calls and see those people at the grocery store and the drug stores. But if you're not going to address it, then I'm afraid if we're going to look out 10 years and 20 years more and 25 for that doubling of our population, we don't have an opportunity to make a lot of mistakes. We've got to get it right. There are times in 2007, hindsight's always 20/20, but there were some areas that we really needed to ratchet down, if I can use the term, on some land use and some zoning. But because the economy, for what it's worth, you look back, there was a window of 2 or 3 years and people were kind of nervous about the economic side of our community. And if you did this, would people still come here? We know that people move into our community for public education and for good jobs. The schools, the chambers would tell you people move here because of schools. I somewhat agree with that, but I also know from my perspective, it's about good paying jobs. It's about working with our city partners to be able to facilitate the growth of our community in the Brentwoods, in the Franklins, in the Nolansville, in the Spring Hill Thompson Stations, and Fairview community, where people live. You and I both know to drive up and down Interstate 65, Franklin Road, Hillsborough Road to get to work to Nashville, at best, is a chore. And there's about half as many people coming the other way that are going to work. There's another half coming to work in our community, around that Cool Springs area, around, you name it, in the town. So we have to get it right because as traffic patterns continue and we don't have any kind of transit plan, our transit plan is called a carpool if you and I ride together to Nashville. That's about it. Or you do an Uber or you do a Lyft. But for the most part, in the next 10 years, you're not going to see a lot of changes in that model because it's so expensive and money has to be appropriated from the federal government, who, by the way, is trying to do this community in Phoenix and Nevada and Florida. They're all trying to do the same thing we are, trying to acquire some of those dollars, which come from the census basis. Kind of all feeds itself all around. But we have to get it right. And we really are encouraging people to attend these public meetings or go to our website and give us comments, because within the next 90 to 100 days, we're going to present this plan.
That's right.
And there'll be some people that say, yes, I'm all for it. There'll be some large lot owners, large landowners will say, well, I'm not sure how's this going to affect my property if I go to sell it. All of those are really valid points that we have to make a decision. Your legislative body has to make a decision. Your planning commission has to make a decision. And then we start on the zoning process.
That's right, because the zoning is actually how you take that vision and make it reality, or at least attempt to make it reality. What I would say with this is, planners are, the whole planning process set up with the idea that we are trained to sort of look out in the future and say, these, based on what we're seeing, are the outcomes. We can give you whatever advice. I can tell you whatever advice I might give you, but in the end, this is your community.
That's right.
And if if you're concerned about where your community is going, expressing that's a lot better than having a group of people sit around and guess where you want to be.
Well, we use that data. As I indicated earlier, we're getting ready to open our 49th Williamson County school. And it is so important for good planning, but for good spending, that we know where these communities are so that we can do our best to put a school centrally located, which eliminates a lot of roads or traffic congestion, so that a school bus cost, we just bought nearly 2 dozen school buses the other night. Those aren't cheap. Those school buses run $85,000 to $100,000 a piece, and they're only good for 15 years. That's right. And our growth pattern, if we went from 183 to 235,000 people, that's a bunch of new kids riding school buses. We have taken steps through a program called Educational Impact Fees that's still in litigation. That has nothing to do with stopping or slowing growth. That's just to help pay for the capital cost of new buildings that we're having to pay for schools.
That is correct. That is correct. And we very recently, when this particular set of legislation was passed 3 years ago, we made a commitment to the county made a commitment to everyone that within 3 years we would go back and look at it and look again on what our growth trends were, what the trends are for in the building community, because obviously we're subject to whether building costs go up or down, land costs going up or down, even these school buses factor in there in a very small way. And so back in October, we actually established a new set of fees that will go into effect 1st of March. Now, across the board, they're somewhere in the range of 10 to 12%, maybe 14. And even in one case, we even lowered a fee. But the idea was, with this study, we tried to capture, based on size of house, how many school students would be produced by that house. And it gets further stratified by the idea that in certain areas within Franklin Special School District, we do not, the rate is lower simply because all that Williamson County provides within the Franklin Special School District are services for high school. So, It was an interesting study done by the same group of folks that did the study back before 3 years ago, Tischler Bice, and so we have that to look forward to on the 1st of March.
Well, and I think it's important to stress to people who are watching this show that this county is always trying to be proactive on so many of the things that we're trying to do to help hold those taxes down. Oftentimes, the only thing that I'm judged on when I have to run for office is, did you raise taxes? Mm-hmm. And did you raise property taxes specifically? Mm-hmm. And I don't know that's unfair. I'm not going to complain. I'm a big boy. Nobody twisted my arm to run to be the mayor and help kind of be the overseer of the finance of people. But at the end of the day, when a community is growing 40 to 50,000 people per 10-year cycle, mm-hmm. it's very difficult to say those new people moving in are going to cover the cost. And it's not only difficult, it's almost impossible. Because we just had a meeting recently with the sheriff, and we've got to have a new jail here in a few years. So that's $150 million that nobody wants to spend. We're going to have a new juvenile center. It's going to be $55 million if it's a penny. There are so many other things that are all tied to this population, what you do to get that good raw data so that we can operate efficiently and effectively throughout the county. The cities continue to grow, some through annexation, but they're backfilling or they're filling in on that land that is called the city limits. But we have to provide schools for the majority of our city residents, unless they happen to be in that fixed zone of the Franklin Special. So these costs are paramount. We only have a minute left, Joe.
Okay.
But I want to personally thank you for running the flag, carrying the water, whatever it is, because your job changes almost on a daily basis. But what you do makes a difference in our county.
I appreciate that. I've been fortunate to have a good staff, a pretty decent boss. No, I'm sorry, a good boss. Well, and so I compare what I do to a lot of other people who have similar positions than I do, and I find myself having to say I have a good support system, and that makes a big difference when you're doing these things.
Yes, it does. Joe Horne been with us today. We're going to have to cut it off. Our time's up. If you got questions, want to be involved, feel free to call him or me. Have a good day.